They walk among us. They wear human faces, but beneath the skin they are something else entirely. This is the full story.
In the mythology of nearly every civilization that has ever existed on this planet, there is a serpent. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent tempts humanity into forbidden knowledge and triggers the fall from grace. In Hindu mythology, the Nagas, divine serpent beings of immense power, dwell in underground kingdoms beneath rivers and lakes, shape-shifting between human and serpentine forms at will, sometimes ruling as benevolent kings, sometimes devouring the unwary. In Mesoamerican tradition, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl is a god of wind and learning who descends from the heavens to teach humanity civilization itself. In Egyptian cosmology, the great serpent Apep, the embodiment of chaos, battles the sun god Ra every night in the underworld, threatening to swallow the sun and plunge creation into eternal darkness. In Chinese tradition, the dragon, a serpentine creature of immense wisdom and authority, is the symbol of imperial power itself, its image reserved exclusively for the emperor. The universality of the serpent in human mythology is not in itself mysterious. Snakes are among the oldest and most widespread predators on Earth, present on every continent except Antarctica. Evolutionary psychologists have documented an innate human sensitivity to serpentine shapes, a phenomenon called ophidiophontia that appears to be partially hardwired into the primate brain, likely because our distant ancestors who were alert to snakes were more likely to survive and reproduce. The serpent's unique characteristics, its lack of limbs, its ability to shed its skin and appear renewed, its silent and sudden strike, its association with both venom and medicine, made it a natural symbol for the uncanny, the dangerous, and the transformative. Every human culture that encountered snakes developed mythologies around them, and those mythologies naturally reflected the serpent's real-world characteristics: deception, hidden danger, transformation, and ancient wisdom. But in the late 20th century, a very different interpretation of these ancient myths emerged. What if the serpent stories were not metaphors at all? What if they were memories, garbled, mythologized, but fundamentally accurate accounts of encounters with actual reptilian beings who had visited Earth, interacted with early humans, and established themselves as rulers of human civilization? What if the Nagas of India, the serpent of Eden, and the feathered serpent of Mexico were all describing the same real phenomenon, a race of intelligent, shape-shifting reptilian entities who had controlled humanity from the shadows since the dawn of recorded history? This is the central premise of the reptilian conspiracy theory, and however extraordinary it may sound, it has been embraced, in some form, by millions worldwide. The numbers are genuinely remarkable. A 2013 survey by Public Policy Polling found that approximately 4% of registered American voters, representing roughly 12 million people, stated that they believed lizard people controlled the world. International surveys suggest comparable or higher numbers in some other countries. David Icke, the former British television presenter who became the theory's most prominent advocate, has lectured to audiences of up to 6,000 people at single events, published more than 20 books that have sold millions of copies, and claims followers in 47 countries.
Whatever one thinks of the theory's truth value, and the scientific consensus is that it has none, its cultural reach demands serious examination. The reptilian conspiracy theory, in its most fully developed modern form, holds that a race of shape-shifting reptilian humanoids, sometimes called Trichomnians, Archons, or Annunaki, originated from the Alpha Draconis star system and arrived on Earth thousands of years ago. These beings interacted with early human civilizations, genetically manipulated the human species to create a more compliant population, and established hybrid bloodlines, families with both reptilian and human DNA, who would serve as their proxies in governing human affairs. According to this narrative, the major royal dynasties, political families, and financial dynasties of human history are all members of these reptilian-human hybrid bloodlines, and they maintain their power through a combination of shape-shifting ability, vast inherited wealth, and membership in secret societies that preserve the knowledge of their true nature. The theory further claims that these reptilian beings require specific resources from human civilization to survive. In David Icke's version, which is the most widely known, the reptilians feed on negative human emotional energy, which he calls loosh. Fear, anger, despair, grief, and suffering generate this energy, which the reptilian beings consume as a form of psychic sustenance. This is why, according to the theory, the world is so consistently plagued by war, famine, economic exploitation, and deliberate social conflict, not because these are the tragic consequences of human nature and flawed institutions, but because they are deliberately manufactured by reptilian overlords to generate the emotional energy they need to feed. Every war is a harvest, every financial crisis is a feast, every act of human suffering is dinner.
The theory also claims that these beings periodically require the consumption of physical human blood, particularly the blood of children. This claim, which mirrors medieval blood libel accusations against Jewish communities with disturbing precision, is presented by adherents as the explanation for persistent legends about elite pedophilia rings, human sacrifice, and ritualistic abuse. The connection to QAnon mythology, which also centers on claims of elite child exploitation, is direct and well documented. The reptilian theory provided a cosmological framework, aliens feeding on children, for claims that would later be secularized and politicized in the QAnon movement. To the scientifically literate observer, the reptilian conspiracy theory presents an obvious challenge. There is no physical evidence whatsoever for the existence of reptilian humanoids. No bodies have been recovered. No DNA samples have been analyzed. No underground bases have been discovered, despite the global reach of satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, and mining operations. No credible defector from the alleged reptilian power structure has ever come forward with verifiable evidence. The theory posits the existence of beings who have controlled human civilization for thousands of years, infiltrated every major institution, and maintained operational security across millennia, yet have left behind precisely zero physical traces. This is an extraordinary claim, supported by extraordinary absence of evidence. And yet the theory persists and grows. It persists because it addresses psychological needs that are real, even when the theory itself is not. It provides a concrete, visible enemy for the abstract anxieties of modern life, the sense that powerful forces control our destinies without our knowledge or consent.
It offers a unified explanation for the seemingly random suffering of the world, transforming chaos into conspiracy, meaninglessness into meaning. It creates a community of initiated believers who share special knowledge unavailable to the unenlightened masses. And it taps into something genuinely ancient in the human psyche, our species' deep evolutionary relationship with serpents, and the mythological traditions that relationship has generated across every culture on Earth.
Understanding the reptilian conspiracy theory requires tracing its development through three distinct phases: its origins in early 20th century pulp fiction and occultism, its synthesis into a unified theory by David Icke in the late 1990s, and its explosive digital age proliferation through YouTube, social media, and the broader conspiracy theory ecosystem. Each phase reveals something important, not just about the theory itself, but about the cultural conditions that made it possible. The human appetite for hidden knowledge, the power of compelling narrative to override evidence, and the dark undercurrents of hatred and scapegoating that flow beneath the theory's science fiction surface. The modern reptilian conspiracy theory did not emerge from ancient mythology or scientific discovery. It emerged from fiction, specifically from the American pulp magazines of the 1920s, whose lurid covers and sensational stories created an imaginative universe that would, decades later, be mistaken for revelation. The key figure is Robert Irvin Howard, born in 1806 in the small town of Peaster, Texas, a prolific and tormented writer of fantasy, horror, and adventure stories, who is remembered today as the creator of Conan the Barbarian. In 1929, Howard published a short story called The Shadow Kingdom in Weird Tales magazine. The story introduced the Serpent Men, an ancient race of intelligent reptilian beings who could assume perfect human form and had infiltrated the royal court of Velusia, an imaginary prehistoric kingdom. The Serpent Men were patient, intelligent, and utterly alien, wearing human faces to conceal their true nature while manipulating the affairs of civilization from within. Howard's Serpent Men were a work of imagination. He made no claims otherwise, but the story drew on existing esoteric traditions, particularly the Theosophical movement, founded by Helena Blavatsky in the 1870s. Theosophy taught that human history encompassed vast cycles of civilization, including lost continents, Atlantis, Lemuria, Hyperborea, that had risen and fallen before recorded history. Blavatsky's system included the concept of root races, successive species of beings who had inhabited the earth, each more evolved than the last. While Blavatsky's root races were not reptilian, her framework of hidden ancient civilizations and secret evolutionary hierarchies provided the conceptual infrastructure that later writers would, consciously or unconsciously, treat as historical source material. The critical transitional figure between fiction and alleged fact was Maurice Doreal, born Claude Doggins in 1902 in Oklahoma. Doreal was an American occultist who founded the Brotherhood of the White Temple in Colorado and claimed to have accessed ancient wisdom through astral travel and contact with ascended masters. In the 1940s, Doreal published a pamphlet titled Mysteries of the Gobi that described a serpent race, beings with humanoid bodies and serpentine heads who could take human form and had waged war against the forces of light in prehistoric times. Academic analysis of Doreal's writings has demonstrated direct borrowings from Howard's fiction,
But whereas Howard had presented his serpent men as imaginative creations, Durrell presented virtually identical beings as genuine historical entities whose existence was recorded in ancient texts that only he had access to. Durrell also claimed to have translated the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, a set of texts he attributed to the ancient Egyptian god of wisdom. These tablets, according to Durrell, contained detailed accounts of humanity's interactions with serpent beings in the distant past. The Emerald Tablets became widely circulated in New Age and occultist communities and are still available today. Professional Egyptologists and scholars of ancient languages have found no evidence that the tablets existed in any ancient language. They appear to be Durrell's own compositions, written in a portentous pseudo-biblical style. But within the alternative knowledge community, the Emerald Tablets acquired the status of genuine ancient documents, and their serpent being content became part of the evidential foundation for later conspiracy theories. The next major contribution came from Zecharia Sitchin, a Russian-born Israeli-American author who published The 12th Planet in 1976. Sitchin claimed to have translated ancient Sumerian cuneiform texts, the oldest known form of writing, and discovered references to the Annunaki, beings from a hypothetical planet called Nibiru, who had visited Earth approximately 450,000 years ago. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki had genetically engineered modern humans by combining their own DNA with that of early hominids, creating a slave species to mine gold for them. When their planet's orbit took them far from Earth, the Anunnaki left behind hybrid offspring and appointed human priests and kings to rule in their absence.
Sitchin's claims were rejected by every professional Assyriologist and scholar of Sumerian language who reviewed them. His translations were demonstrably incorrect. He assigned meanings to Sumerian words that bore no relationship to their established translations, and his interpretations required ignoring the vast body of existing Sumerian scholarship. The planet Nibiru does not exist. Extensive astronomical surveys have found no evidence of a large undiscovered planet in the outer solar system. But Sitchin's books sold millions of copies worldwide and established the Anunnaki as the standard name for ancient alien visitors in the conspiracy theory ecosystem. His work provided the pseudo-archaeological foundation upon which David Icke would build his reptilian theory 2 decades later. The visual dimension of the reptilian conspiracy theory owes as much to television as to literature. In 1983, NBC broadcast V, a science fiction miniseries created by Kenneth Johnson about an alien invasion of Earth. The aliens arrived in massive motherships, appeared human and friendly, but were actually reptilian beings concealed beneath synthetic human skin. The series included a now iconic scene in which a character peeled away a woman's human face to reveal the scaled reptilian features beneath. V was intended as an allegory about fascism. Johnson has stated that he was inspired by Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here, but its lasting cultural impact was the visual vocabulary it provided for the reptilian conspiracy theory. The image of a human face being removed to reveal a reptile underneath became the defining icon of the theory.
The cultural pipeline from fiction to conspiracy theory followed a pattern that researchers have documented in multiple contexts. A creative work introduces an imaginative concept. That concept is adopted by fringe thinkers who strip it of its fictional context and present it as hidden truth. The hidden truth version is circulated within alternative knowledge communities, and eventually the fictional origins are forgotten or denied entirely. Howard's Serpent Men became Doriel's historical serpent race, which became Sitchin's Annunaki, which became Icke's reptilian overlords. At each stage, the claims became more elaborate and more confident, and the fictional origins became more thoroughly obscured.
By the mid-1990s, all the ingredients for a comprehensive reptilian conspiracy theory were in place. Ancient mythology reinterpreted as alien contact, pseudo-archaeological translations claiming alien intervention in human evolution, occultist texts describing serpent beings who could take human form, and television imagery showing reptilian aliens disguised as humans. What was needed was a synthesizer, someone who could combine these disparate elements into a unified narrative and present it with the conviction and charisma necessary to build a mass audience. That person was already on stage, having just survived the most public humiliation in British television history. His name was David Icke. David von Icke was born on April 29, 1952, in Leicester, England, the son of a working-class family who grew up in public housing. He showed early athletic talent and became a professional football goalkeeper, playing for Coventry City and Hereford United before rheumatoid arthritis ended his playing career in his early 20s. Icke transitioned into sports broadcasting, becoming a well-known BBC television presenter, a familiar, likable face on programs like Grandstand and the Evening News. By the late 1980s, he was a respectable media professional with a comfortable career, a public profile, and no apparent connection to the world of conspiracy theories or esoteric thought. What happened next would transform both his life and the landscape of global conspiracy culture forever. In 1989, Icke experienced what he described as a spiritual awakening while visiting a psychic healer on the Isle of Wight. He felt a presence in the room, received what he interpreted as channeled information from a higher dimension, and became convinced that he had been chosen to communicate important truths to humanity. Over the following months, Icke's worldview underwent a radical transformation. He resigned from his position with the Green Party, where he had served as national spokesperson, and began wearing exclusively turquoise clothing because he believed the color had healing properties and represented a specific vibrational frequency. His behavior alarmed friends and family, who attributed it to a mental health crisis. Icke attributed it to an awakening that most people were not yet ready to understand.
The defining moment came on April 29, 1991, when Icke appeared on the BBC chat show Wogan, hosted by Terry Wogan. Wearing a turquoise tracksuit, Icke declared on live national television that he was a son of the Godhead, that the world was controlled by dark forces, and that catastrophic earth changes were imminent. The studio audience laughed openly and repeatedly. Wogan, visibly embarrassed for his guest, asked gentle but probing questions. Icke did not waver. The interview became one of the most watched moments in British television history, and it made Icke a national figure of ridicule. For years afterward, he could not walk down a British street without being laughed at.
He has described this period as the most painful of his life, a crucible of public humiliation that paradoxically freed him from concern about public opinion and gave him the psychological armor to spend the next 3 decades promoting ideas that mainstream society found absurd. The turquoise phase was a transitional period. Over the following years, Icke read voraciously in conspiracy literature, alternative history, occultism, and New Age spirituality. He absorbed the works of Sitchin, the claims of Arizona Wilder, a woman who alleged she had been used as a blood ritual facilitator for shape-shifting reptilian royals, and the testimony of Credo Mutloff, a South African Zulu Sangoma who told Icke stories about the Chitari, serpent beings that traditional Zulu cosmology held responsible for human suffering. Icke synthesized these diverse sources with existing conspiracy narratives about the Illuminati, the New World Order, and elite bloodlines to produce something genuinely new, a unified grand theory in which the ultimate controllers of human civilization were not merely human conspirators, but interdimensional reptilian beings. The result was The Biggest Secret, published in 1998, the book that made Icke the world's most famous conspiracy theorist. In its 500 pages, Icke presented a comprehensive narrative. The reptilian beings from Alpha Draconis had crossbred with human bloodlines in antiquity, creating hybrid families who became the royal houses and ruling dynasties of human civilization. The British royal family, the Bush family, the Rothschilds, the Merovingians, and other prominent families were all members of these reptilian-human hybrid lines. They maintained their power through secret societies, the Illuminati, the Freemasons, the Skull and Bones, and used institutions like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the media to control the global population. Their ultimate goal was the implementation of a totalitarian world government under their direct control.
The book names specific individuals as shape-shifting reptilians, including Queen Elizabeth II, members of the Bush family, and various political and corporate leaders. Icke claimed that these individuals had been witnessed transforming from human to reptilian form during private rituals involving blood consumption and sexual abuse. These claims were based primarily on the testimony of a small number of individuals, Arizona Wilder foremost among them, whose accounts could not be independently verified, and whose credibility was questioned even within the conspiracy community. Nevertheless, the specificity and audacity of the claims, naming the Queen of England as a blood-drinking, shape-shifting alien, generated enormous publicity and sales. Icke's theory grew more elaborate in subsequent books. Children of the Matrix, published in 2001, expanded the reptilian bloodline narrative. Tales from the Time Loop, published in 2003, introduced the concept of reality as a holographic simulation controlled by reptilian entities. The David Icke Guide to the Global Conspiracy, published in 2007, synthesized the entire worldview into a comprehensive reference work. Human Race Get Off Your Knees, published in 2010, introduced the moon matrix concept, the claim that the moon is an artificial construct broadcasting a frequency that keeps human consciousness trapped in a limited perceptual bandwidth. Each new book added layers to the theory while maintaining its core structure: reptilian beings operating through human reptilian bloodlines and secret societies, controlling human civilization for the purpose of energy harvesting. The scale of Icke's following grew proportionally. By the 2010s, he was filling large venues worldwide. Wembley Arena in London, which seats over 12,000, hosted Icke for a 12-hour marathon lecture in 2012. His books had been translated into dozens of languages. His website attracted millions of visitors. He had evolved from a figure of universal ridicule into the leader of a global movement with devoted adherents in dozens of countries.
For his followers, Icke was not a crank, but a prophet, a man who had suffered public crucifixion for his beliefs and emerged stronger, just as he had predicted. The Wogan interview that had destroyed his mainstream credibility had, paradoxically, become his origin story, proof that the system tried to silence those who spoke the truth.
Whether Icke genuinely believes his own claims is a question that has fascinated observers for decades. Some who have met him privately report that he is sincere, intelligent, and deeply convinced of his worldview. Others suspect that he is a calculating showman who discovered that reptilian conspiracy theories could sustain a lucrative speaking and publishing career. The truth may be that both assessments are partially correct, that Icke began with genuine spiritual experiences, interpreted them through the lens of conspiracy literature he absorbed during a psychologically vulnerable period, and then found that his interpretations attracted an audience large enough to sustain a professional career, creating a feedback loop in which audience response reinforced and encouraged increasingly extreme claims. Every conspiracy theory needs evidence, or at least what its adherents believe is evidence. The reptilian conspiracy theory has assembled a body of purported proof that spans multiple disciplines and media formats, from ancient archaeology to modern digital video, from genealogical research to physiological observation. For skeptics, this evidence is either misinterpreted mundane phenomena or outright fabrication. For believers, it represents an overwhelming pattern that the mainstream scientific establishment either cannot or will not acknowledge. Understanding why the evidence feels compelling to millions of people requires examining each category on its own terms before evaluating it against established scientific knowledge, because the emotional power of pattern recognition operates independently of the pattern's objective validity. The ancient mythology argument is the theory's broadest evidence base. Believers point to the universal presence of serpent figures in world religions and mythologies as evidence that early humans had direct contact with reptilian beings whose memory was preserved in religious narratives. The Nagas of Hindu mythology, shape-shifting serpent beings who live in underground kingdoms and sometimes interact with humans, are perhaps the closest mythological parallel to the modern reptilian theory. The Sumerian Annunaki, the serpent in Eden, the Chinese dragon, the feathered serpent of Mesoamerica, the Apep of Egyptian cosmology, and the Jormungandr of Norse mythology are all cited as evidence of a global memory of reptilian contact. The theory asks a seductive question: why do all these unconnected civilizations tell similar stories about powerful serpentine beings? The conventional answer, that snakes are universal features of the natural environment and that human psychology generates similar symbolic responses to similar stimuli, is less exciting than the conspiracy answer, which is that they were all remembering the same real beings. The alleged video evidence is the theory's most viral and immediately compelling category. Dozens of videos circulate online purporting to show politicians, celebrities, and news anchors exhibiting reptilian characteristics: vertical slit pupils, unusual eye movements, skin that appears to glitch or reveal scaled texture beneath, and facial distortions that believers interpret as momentary failures in shape-shifting. These videos have accumulated hundreds of millions of views on YouTube and other platforms. They are typically accompanied by dramatic narration, slow-motion replays, and red circles highlighting the alleged anomalies. For viewers already primed to believe in reptilian infiltration, the videos are electrifying, visual proof that the conspiracy is real and hiding in plain sight. Video engineers and digital media experts have consistently explained that the alleged reptilian evidence in these videos is produced by entirely ordinary technical processes. Digital video compression, particularly MPEG and H.264 codecs, works by encoding changes between frames rather than complete images. When a complex texture like a human face moves against a background, the compression algorithm can produce artifacts, blocky distortions, color shifts, apparent texture changes that have nothing to do with the actual appearance of the subject.
Low-resolution streaming, poor lighting conditions, and rapid movement all increase the likelihood of visible compression artifacts. The human face, with its complex contours, subtle coloring, and constant micro-movements, is precisely the kind of visual data that compression algorithms handle most imperfectly. What believers see as shape-shifting is, in every documented case, standard digital video compression behavior. The genealogical evidence appeals to a different kind of pattern recognition. Researchers, including the British genealogical authority Burke's Peerage, have documented that most American presidents share common ancestry, and that presidential candidates with more extensive royal British ancestry have tended to win elections. This is presented by conspiracy theorists as proof of a managed bloodline succession, evidence that a specific genetic line is being maintained in power by design. The conventional explanation is demographic rather than conspiratorial. American political leaders have historically been drawn from a relatively small pool of wealthy, educated, British-descended families, and within that pool, distant cousinship is statistically inevitable. When you start with a small founding population and select for wealth and political prominence across generations, genealogical overlap is a mathematical certainty, not evidence of alien intervention.
The symbolic evidence adds another layer. Believers identify serpentine and reptilian imagery throughout elite institutions, the serpent on medical and pharmaceutical symbols, dragon imagery on royal coats of arms, reptilian motifs in corporate logos, and the prevalence of snake and dragon imagery in the heraldry of the world's oldest institutions. This is interpreted as the reptilian elite encoding their identity in plain sight, a signature left by beings who are both arrogant enough to display their nature openly and confident enough in human obliviousness to do so without consequence. The conventional explanation is that serpent symbolism has been valued across human cultures for millennia for well-understood reasons. Its associations with healing, wisdom, power, rebirth, and the underworld, and that elite institutions, like all human organizations, use cultural symbols with deep historical resonance. The physiological observations represent the theory's most personal and emotionally charged evidence category. Believers report observing reptilian characteristics in specific individuals: cold handshakes, unusual skin texture, eyes that briefly flash with vertical pupils, and behavior described as robotic or lacking genuine human empathy. These observations are highly subjective and impossible to verify, but they feel intensely real to those who report them. Psychologists who study anomalous experiences note that the brain's pattern recognition systems are highly susceptible to suggestion. Once primed to look for reptilian features, the brain will begin finding them in the normal variations of human appearance and behavior. This is apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections in random or unrelated phenomena, operating at the level of direct perception. The cumulative effect of these evidence categories is greater than any individual piece. Each category taken in isolation has a clear and documented conventional explanation. But when presented together, ancient mythology, video evidence, genealogical patterns, symbolic encoding, and physiological observation, they create what feels like an overwhelming convergence of proof from multiple independent sources. This convergence effect is one of the most powerful cognitive dynamics in conspiracy belief, the sense that all these different kinds of evidence could not all be wrong, that the pattern is too consistent and too widespread to be coincidental. The reality is that each piece of evidence is independently flawed, and combining flawed evidence does not produce valid evidence. It produces a larger pile of the same errors. The evidence debate illuminates a fundamental asymmetry between conspiracy theories and scientific inquiry. Science evaluates evidence through rigorous methodology, controlled experiments, peer review, reproducibility, and the systematic elimination of alternative explanations. Conspiracy theories evaluate evidence through pattern recognition, the identification of apparent connections, anomalies, and coincidences that feel significant. These are fundamentally different cognitive processes, and they produce fundamentally different kinds of certainty. Scientific certainty is provisional, qualified, and open to revision. Conspiracy certainty is total, unqualified, and resistant to revision. This is why no amount of scientific debunking resolves conspiracy belief. The two systems are not speaking the same language. David Icke's reptilian theory did not remain confined to claims about shape-shifting aliens in positions of power. Over successive books and lectures, it expanded into a comprehensive metaphysical system that made claims not merely about who controls the world, but about the fundamental nature of reality itself. The two most extraordinary extensions of the theory, the moon matrix and the concept of louche, transformed what had begun as a political conspiracy theory into something closer to a new religion, with its own cosmology, its own physics, and its own explanation for the totality of human suffering. Understanding these extensions is essential because they reveal the mechanism by which the reptilian theory became unfalsifiable and thereby became immune to any possible counter-evidence. The moon matrix concept, introduced most fully in Icke's 2010 book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, holds that the moon is not a natural celestial body, but an artificial construct, a hollowed-out planetoid or massive spacecraft positioned in Earth's orbit by the reptilian beings as a control and broadcasting device. From the moon, according to Icke, the reptilians broadcast a frequency that Icke calls the moon matrix, a signal that interferes with human consciousness, limiting the range of frequencies that the human brain can decode and thereby trapping humanity in a narrow band of perceptual reality. The world that humans experience, three-dimensional physical reality governed by linear time, is, in this view, not the full extent of reality, but a controlled simulation broadcast from the moon, designed to keep humans ignorant of their true multidimensional nature.
The moon matrix concept drew on multiple pre-existing ideas. The suggestion that the moon might be hollow or artificial was first made by Soviet scientists Mikhail Vasin and Alexander Sherbakov in a 1970 article in Sputnik magazine, where they playfully suggested that the moon's unusual characteristics, its low density, its exact size ratio to the sun as viewed from Earth, its tendency to ring like a bell when struck by impacts, might be explained if it were a hollow artificial structure. Their suggestion was not serious, but it entered the alternative knowledge ecosystem and was treated as genuine scientific speculation. Icke combined this with the simulation hypothesis, the philosophical proposition that reality might be a computer simulation, and with his own interpretation of quantum physics, in which consciousness plays a fundamental role in constructing perceived reality. The louche concept addressed a question that the political version of the reptilian theory left unanswered. Why would advanced beings capable of interstellar travel and reality manipulation bother controlling a primitive species on a small planet? Icke's answer was that reptilian beings feed on human emotional energy, specifically on the energy generated by negative emotions such as fear, anger, grief, hatred, and despair. He adopted the term louche from Robert Monroe, a businessman and researcher into out-of-body experiences, who coined the word in his 1985 book Far Journeys to describe what he perceived as an energy produced by living beings during intense emotional experiences. In Monroe's framework, louche was a neutral concept. In Icke's adaptation, it became the economic foundation of the entire reptilian control system. The implications of the loosh concept are totalizing. If negative human emotions produce energy that reptilian beings consume, then every source of human suffering becomes evidence for the theory. Wars are not the result of territorial disputes, ideological conflicts, or resource competition. They are farming operations designed to maximize the production of loosh through mass fear and death. Economic crises are not the result of market dynamics or policy failures. They are deliberate harvesting events. Pandemics, natural disasters, famines, domestic violence, child abuse, every form of human suffering, from the civilizational to the personal, is reframed as a product of deliberate reptilian engineering. The world is, in this view, literally a farm, and humanity is the livestock.
The theological parallels are striking and, by Icke's own acknowledgement, intentional. The loosh concept mirrors the Gnostic tradition, an ancient set of religious movements that held that the material world was created not by a benevolent god, but by a malevolent or ignorant deity called the demiurge, who trapped divine sparks of consciousness in physical bodies to feed on their spiritual energy. Icke has explicitly cited Gnostic texts as supporting evidence for his claims, arguing that the ancient Gnostics were describing the same reality that he describes, a prison reality maintained by archontic entities who harvest human spiritual energy. The convergence between Icke's theory and ancient Gnostic mythology is, for believers, further evidence that the truth has been known throughout history. For scholars, it is evidence that Icke borrowed his cosmology from existing religious traditions and repackaged it in science fiction terminology. The Matrix films, released beginning in 1999, provided the reptilian theory with its most potent cultural metaphor. The premise of The Matrix, that humanity is trapped in a simulated reality generated by machines that harvest human energy, was so structurally similar to Icke's theory that he has repeatedly claimed the films were inspired by his work, a claim the filmmakers have not confirmed. The red pill and blue pill metaphor, choosing to see the true nature of reality or remaining in comfortable ignorance, became central to Icke's rhetoric and to the broader conspiracy community. Taking the red pill became shorthand for adopting conspiracy beliefs, and the phrase has since been adopted across multiple conspiracy and political subcultures. The moon matrix and loosh concepts serve a critical function in the architecture of the reptilian theory. They make it completely unfalsifiable. If reality itself is a simulation broadcast from the moon, then any evidence that contradicts the theory can be dismissed as part of the simulation, a generated data point designed to maintain the illusion. If negative emotions are the product that the reptilians harvest, then any attempt to make the world better is either futile because the system is designed to produce suffering, or itself a manipulation because apparent progress makes people complacent and easier to control. The theory accounts for every possible state of the world and is therefore compatible with every possible observation. This is not a strength, it is the defining characteristic of a non-scientific belief system.
The expansion from political conspiracy to metaphysical cosmology also served a practical purpose for Icke's career. Political conspiracy theories can be investigated and potentially debunked through journalism, government transparency, and forensic analysis. Claims about shape-shifting can be tested through video evidence and DNA analysis. But claims about the nature of reality itself, about interdimensional frequencies and consciousness traps, are beyond the reach of any investigative methodology. By moving the core of his theory from the physical to the metaphysical, from claims that can be tested to claims that cannot, Icke ensured that his theory could never be conclusively refuted and that his audience would never run out of mysteries to explore.
Beneath the science fiction surface of the reptilian conspiracy theory lies something far darker and far older than alien shapeshifters. Critics, researchers, and anti-hate organizations have extensively documented the structural overlap between the reptilian conspiracy theory and centuries-old anti-Semitic mythology, an overlap so comprehensive that some scholars have concluded the reptilian theory functions as a coded form of anti-Semitism, allowing adherents to express traditionally anti-Semitic ideas while maintaining plausible deniability by claiming to be talking about literal aliens rather than any human ethnic group. This is the dimension of the reptilian theory that transforms it from a harmless eccentricity into something genuinely dangerous, and understanding it requires tracing the connections between ancient blood libel accusations, modern conspiracy narratives, and the specific families and institutions that Icke and his followers identify as reptilian. The blood libel, the accusation that Jewish communities kidnapped and murdered Christian children to use their blood in religious rituals, is one of the oldest and most destructive anti-Semitic myths in European history. Originating in the 12th century, the blood libel led directly to pogroms, expulsions, and massacres of Jewish communities across Europe for over 800 years. The accusation always followed the same pattern. A secretive, non-Christian community was alleged to prey on innocent children, consuming their blood in dark rituals. The parallel to Icke's claims about reptilian beings who require the consumption of human blood, particularly children's blood, in ritualistic ceremonies is precise and disturbing. When Icke describes elite reptilian-human hybrids drinking children's blood in underground ceremonies, he is reproducing the exact narrative structure of the blood libel, with reptilians substituted for Jews.
The families most frequently identified by Icke as reptilian bloodline members include a disproportionate number of Jewish families, most prominently the Rothschilds, who occupy a central position in virtually every anti-Semitic conspiracy theory of the past 2 centuries. Icke has named the Rothschild family as key members of the reptilian hybrid bloodline in multiple books and lectures. He has also identified other families with Jewish origins as part of the reptilian control structure. This pattern, identifying predominantly Jewish families as the hidden rulers of the world who manipulate governments and financial systems for sinister purposes, is indistinguishable in its structure from traditional anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. The only difference is the claimed motivation. Traditional anti-Semitism attributes the alleged Jewish conspiracy to ethnic solidarity or religious directive, while Icke attributes it to alien genetics. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a fabricated document originally produced by the Russian secret police in the early 1900s that purported to reveal a Jewish conspiracy for world domination, provides another structural parallel. The protocols describe a secret group meeting in which plans are laid for controlling the world's governments, financial systems, and media through deception, manipulation, and the deliberate engineering of social conflict. Icke's descriptions of reptilian council meetings in which plans are laid for controlling the world's governments, financial systems, and media through deception, manipulation, and the deliberate engineering of social conflict are functionally identical. When Icke published excerpts from the protocols in his book The Robot's Rebellion and argued that they described a real conspiracy, attributing it to reptilians rather than Jews, the connection became explicit rather than merely structural.
David Icke has repeatedly and strenuously denied that his theory is anti-Semitic. He argues that he is not talking about Jews, but about interdimensional reptilian beings who happen to have infiltrated some Jewish families, along with many non-Jewish families. He has stated that he opposes anti-Semitism and that his critics are deliberately misrepresenting his work. Some of his supporters, including some who are themselves Jewish, have defended him against the anti-Semitism charge. The question of whether Icke is personally motivated by anti-Semitism, whether he genuinely believes in literal reptilians and arrived at his conclusions independently of anti-Semitic tradition, is ultimately unknowable and perhaps irrelevant. What matters is the theory's function and its effects.
British journalist George Monbiot wrote a widely read analysis arguing that regardless of Icke's personal intentions, his theory is anti-Semitic in its effects because it places Jewish families at the center of a global conspiracy described in terms historically used for anti-Semitic blood libel myths. Researcher Chip Burleigh documented the extensive structural parallels between Icke's work and traditional anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, noting that the substitution of reptilians for Jews functions as a form of plausible deniability. It allows adherents to discuss a conspiracy theory whose entire architecture is anti-Semitic while insisting they are not talking about Jews. Academic Michael Barkan, in his study A Culture of Conspiracy, analyzed how Icke's theory absorbs anti-Semitic mythology while providing its adherents with a defense mechanism against the accusation of anti-Semitism. The real-world consequences of the reptilian theory have been documented. The reptilian theory, like other conspiracy theories that identify shadowy elites as the hidden controllers of world events, has served as a radicalization pathway, drawing individuals from relatively harmless belief in shape-shifting aliens toward more explicitly political and potentially violent ideological positions. The integration of reptilian themes into the QAnon mythology, which centers on claims of elite child exploitation and ritual abuse, demonstrated how the theory's anti-Semitic subtext could be amplified when it merged with a political movement. The Nashville bombing of December 2020, carried out by Anthony Quinn Warner, was reportedly motivated in part by belief in reptilian-adjacent conspiracy theories. The anti-Semitic shadow of the reptilian theory illustrates a broader pattern in conspiracy culture. The tendency of ostensibly non-political conspiracy theories to reproduce and transmit the structural templates of older forms of prejudice. The theory does not need to be explicitly anti-Semitic to function as a vehicle for anti-Semitic ideas. By providing a narrative framework in which a secret bloodline of non-human parasites controls the world through financial manipulation, media deception, and ritualistic violence against children, the theory replicates every major element of anti-Semitic mythology, while replacing the explicit referent with a science fiction substitute. The alien mask conceals the human hatred beneath.
This dimension of the theory demands a response that goes beyond simple debunking. Demonstrating that reptilian beings do not exist does not address the underlying dynamic, the human tendency to identify scapegoats for the anxieties of modern life, to attribute malicious agency to incomprehensible systems of power, and to use dehumanizing narratives to explain the suffering that those systems produce. The reptilian theory is dangerous not because anyone might actually encounter a shape-shifting lizard person, but because it normalizes the cognitive habit of attributing systemic problems to a hidden, parasitic other, a habit with a long and blood-soaked history in human civilization. The reptilian conspiracy theory has achieved something that few conspiracy theories manage. It has become simultaneously a genuine belief system for millions and a source of mainstream entertainment and humor. This dual existence, serious conspiracy theory and cultural joke, is not a contradiction but a reinforcing cycle. Entertainment normalizes the theory's imagery and concepts, making them familiar and accessible. Familiarity makes the theory less threatening to encounter and more likely to be taken seriously by newcomers. And the humor surrounding the theory provides believers with a protective layer. They can deflect criticism by claiming to be joking while maintaining their beliefs privately. The relationship between reptilian conspiracy and popular culture is a case study in how the membrane between fiction and belief has become increasingly permeable in the digital age. The foundational cultural text is V, the 1983 NBC miniseries created by Kenneth Johnson. The show depicted an alien invasion in which extraterrestrial visitors, attractive, apparently human, and offering technological gifts, were revealed to be reptilian beings wearing synthetic human skin. The series included iconic scenes of reptilian faces being revealed beneath human masks, reptilians swallowing live animals whole, and a half-human, half-reptilian baby born to a human woman and an alien father. The series was explicitly intended as an allegory about fascism and collaboration. Johnson has stated that the V stood for victory and that the aliens represented a fascist occupying force, with the human resistance representing partisan fighters. But the show's lasting legacy was visual rather than allegorical. It provided the definitive imagery for the reptilian conspiracy theory.
John Carpenter's 1988 film, They Live, explored similar territory through a different lens. The film's protagonist discovers special sunglasses that allow him to see that the world is controlled by alien beings disguised as humans, who use subliminal messaging embedded in advertising, television, and media to keep the human population docile and obedient. The aliens are skull-faced rather than reptilian, but the film's central premise that society's elites are secretly non-human beings who control humanity through media manipulation maps directly onto the reptilian theory. The film's most famous line, "I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum," has become a cultural meme, but its conceptual influence on conspiracy culture is more significant than its quotability. The Internet age transformed the relationship between reptilian conspiracy and entertainment. The phrase Illuminati confirmed became a widespread Internet meme in the early 2010s, used ironically to mock the tendency of conspiracy theorists to find hidden evidence everywhere, but simultaneously normalizing the concepts it mocked.
Similarly, the idea of lizard people became a standard internet joke applied humorously to any public figure who displayed awkward or robotic behavior. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, became a particular target, with his sometimes stilted public appearances generating thousands of memes characterizing him as a reptilian alien attempting to pass as human. These memes were overwhelmingly humorous in intent, but they kept the reptilian concept in constant cultural circulation. The Marvel Cinematic Universe introduced the Skrulls, shape-shifting alien beings who could perfectly replicate the appearance of any human in the 2019 film Captain Marvel and subsequent projects. While the Skrulls are eventually revealed to be sympathetic refugees rather than sinister infiltrators, the concept of shape-shifting aliens who have secretly replaced key individuals was central to the plot and directly echoed the paranoia of the reptilian conspiracy theory. The Disney Plus series Secret Invasion, released in 2023, explicitly centered on the discovery that Skrulls had infiltrated the highest levels of human government, a premise that could have been taken directly from David Icke's bibliography.
Television comedies and talk shows have regularly parodied the reptilian theory. Saturday Night Live, The Daily Show, and numerous other programs have featured sketches about lizard people controlling the government. The BBC comedy show That Mitchell and Webb created a memorable sketch about two reptilian aliens struggling to maintain their human disguises during a business meeting. The effect of such parodies is ambiguous. On one hand, they mock the theory and position believers as objects of ridicule. On the other hand, they keep the theory in public consciousness, introduce its concepts to audiences who might otherwise never encounter them, and, for existing believers, confirm that the establishment is so confident in its control that it can mock the truth openly. The relationship between entertainment and belief is bi-directional. Fiction provides conspiracy theories with narrative templates, visual vocabulary, and cultural legitimacy. Conspiracy theories provide fiction with premise material, audience engagement, and the frisson of stories that some portion of the audience believes are literally true. This feedback loop is not unique to the reptilian theory. It operates across the entire conspiracy theory ecosystem, but the reptilian theory represents perhaps its most extreme manifestation, because the theory's claims are so visually specific and so cinematically compelling that they translate seamlessly between documentary and fiction. The gaming world has also embraced reptilian themes. Video games from Deus Ex to Assassin's Creed have featured conspiracies involving secret societies that control the world from the shadows, themes that, while not explicitly reptilian, share the theory's structural DNA. The Pokemon franchise features numerous serpentine and draconic creatures. Even the children's show Peppa Pig was briefly the subject of conspiracy claims when viewers alleged that certain episodes contained hidden reptilian symbolism. The ubiquity of serpentine imagery in entertainment is, for believers, further evidence of the reptilian elite's cultural dominance. For everyone else, it is evidence that snakes and dragons make compelling characters.
The cultural saturation of the reptilian theory creates what media scholars call the irony problem. When a theory becomes simultaneously a belief system and a joke, it becomes almost impossible to determine who takes it seriously and who is being ironic. Online communities dedicated to reptilian conspiracy theories contain a mixture of sincere believers, ironic participants, trolls, and individuals whose relationship to the theory is genuinely ambiguous even to themselves. This ambiguity serves the theory's persistence. It can never be entirely dismissed because it might be sincere. and it can never be entirely taken seriously because it might be ironic. The reptilian theory has achieved, through cultural saturation, a kind of quantum superposition, existing simultaneously as truth and as joke, as belief and as entertainment, as danger and as comedy. The Internet did not create the reptilian conspiracy theory, but it transformed it from a niche belief system into a global cultural phenomenon with an audience of millions. The digital ecosystem, YouTube, social media platforms, forums, podcasts, and alternative media websites provided the reptilian theory with distribution channels, community infrastructure, and amplification mechanisms that its pre-internet predecessors could never have imagined. Understanding how digital platforms facilitated the theory's explosive growth reveals important truths about the relationship between technology, information, and belief in the 21st century. Truths that extend far beyond the specific case of reptilian conspiracies. YouTube became the primary distribution platform for reptilian conspiracy content. The platform's recommendation algorithm, designed to maximize user engagement by suggesting videos similar to those a viewer has already watched, created a well-documented pipeline from mainstream content to conspiracy theories. A viewer who watched a documentary about ancient Egypt might be recommended a video about ancient aliens, which might lead to a video about the Annunaki, which might lead to a video about reptilian bloodlines. Each step in the chain was small and seemingly reasonable, but the cumulative journey could take a viewer from mainstream curiosity to deep conspiracy belief in a matter of hours. Researchers have documented this algorithmic radicalization pathway across multiple conspiracy theory domains, and reptilian content was among the most frequently identified endpoints.
The visual nature of the alleged evidence made YouTube an ideal platform. Reptilian conspiracy videos typically center on footage of public figures, politicians giving speeches, celebrities at events, news anchors on camera, with slow-motion replays, zoom effects, and narration highlighting supposed reptilian characteristics. These videos are technically simple to produce, visually compelling, and highly shareable. A single viral video claiming to show a world leader's eyes briefly shifting to reptilian slits could generate millions of views, thousands of comments, and hundreds of response videos, creating a self-reinforcing ecosystem of content creation and consumption. The production quality of reptilian conspiracy videos improved steadily over the years, with some creators producing slickly edited, professionally narrated content that rivaled mainstream documentary production. Social media platforms amplified the theory beyond YouTube. Facebook groups dedicated to reptilian conspiracies accumulated hundreds of thousands of members. Twitter and Reddit hosted active communities where believers shared evidence, debated interpretations, and reinforced each other's convictions. Instagram and TikTok introduced the theory to younger demographics through short-form video content that presented reptilian claims in entertaining, easily digestible formats. The social media dynamic created what researchers call echo chambers, online spaces where a single belief is shared, reinforced, and protected from external challenge, producing a community-level confidence that far exceeds what any individual would develop in isolation. The COVID-19 pandemic of 2020 proved to be both the theory's greatest moment and its ultimate crisis. David Icke was among the first prominent conspiracy theorists to claim that the pandemic was a fabricated or deliberately engineered crisis designed to advance the agenda of the global elite, which in his framework meant the reptilian control structure.
His COVID-related content, posted to YouTube, Facebook, and other platforms, attracted enormous audiences at a time when billions of people were confined to their homes, anxious and actively seeking explanations for the unprecedented disruption of their lives. Icke's claims included assertions that 5G wireless technology was connected to the virus, that the pandemic was planned by elites at Event 201, a pandemic preparedness exercise held in October 2019, and that vaccination was a mechanism for injecting tracking technology into the human population.
The response from platforms was unprecedented. In April 2020, YouTube removed David Icke's channel, which had accumulated hundreds of thousands of subscribers, for violating the platform's policies on COVID misinformation. Facebook followed by removing Icke's page, which had over 700,000 followers. Spotify removed podcasts featuring Icke. The deplatforming was part of a broader effort by technology companies to combat COVID misinformation, but it represented a turning point for the reptilian conspiracy community. For believers, the removal confirmed the theory's truth. Why would powerful forces silence Icke unless he was speaking the truth that they feared? For critics, it demonstrated that platform policies could effectively limit the reach of conspiracy content, even if they could not eliminate belief. The Nashville Christmas bombing of December 2020 provided the most dramatic example of reptilian-adjacent conspiracy belief, leading to real-world violence. Anthony Quinn Warner, a 63-year-old IT professional, detonated a recreational vehicle packed with explosives in downtown Nashville on Christmas morning, killing himself and injuring several others. Investigators found that Warner had been motivated by multiple conspiracy theories, including beliefs about reptilian beings, 5G technology as a weapon, and imminent alien disclosure. The bombing illustrated the potential for conspiracy beliefs, even those as seemingly absurd as reptilian shapeshifters, to motivate lethal action when combined with personal grievance, social isolation, and a sense of approaching apocalyptic crisis. The integration of reptilian elements into the QAnon mythology represented the theory's most significant political evolution. QAnon, which emerged in 2017, centered on claims that a global cabal of powerful elites was engaged in child trafficking and ritual abuse, claims that directly paralleled the reptilian theory's assertions about blood-drinking ceremonies and child exploitation. While QAnon did not formally adopt the reptilian framework, the overlap between the two communities was extensive, and reptilian themes regularly appeared in QAnon-adjacent content. The merging of these communities demonstrated how conspiracy theories that appear distinct can function as modules in a larger conspiracy ecosystem, with believers freely mixing and matching elements from multiple theories to construct personalized worldviews.
The deplatforming of Icke and the broader crackdown on conspiracy content in 2020 did not eliminate the reptilian theory. It drove it to alternative platforms like Telegram, Rumble, and BitChute, where content moderation is minimal or absent. On these platforms, reptilian content exists alongside more extreme material, including explicitly anti-Semitic, white supremacist, and violent extremist content. The migration to unmoderated platforms has intensified the radicalization potential of the theory by placing it in an environment where the most extreme interpretations are the most visible and the most rewarded with engagement. The digital terrarium that sustains the reptilian conspiracy theory has not been sealed. It has merely been relocated to darker, less visible, and potentially more dangerous corners of the Internet. The digital history of the reptilian theory raises fundamental questions about the relationship between free expression, content moderation, and democratic society. Allowing reptilian conspiracy content to circulate freely on mainstream platforms exposes millions of people to a theory with antisemitic subtext and demonstrated potential for real-world violence. Removing it drives the content underground, where it becomes harder to monitor and potentially more extreme. Neither approach solves the underlying problem, the human psychological needs that conspiracy theories address, and the algorithmic incentive structures that reward engaging content regardless of its truth value. The reptilian theory will survive in some form regardless of platform policies, because the conditions that produce it, anxiety, distrust, the need for simple explanations of complex problems, and the evolutionary sensitivity to serpentine threats are built into the human species itself. After 2 decades of investigation, documentation, and debunking, the fundamental question about the reptilian conspiracy theory remains unanswered. Not the question of whether shape-shifting alien lizards secretly control human civilization. The answer to that is unambiguously no, supported by a complete absence of physical evidence. But the far more important question of why millions of intelligent, functioning human beings believe it anyway. The persistence of a belief with zero evidential support in an age of unprecedented access to scientific knowledge and factual verification tools demands an explanation that goes beyond dismissing believers as stupid or crazy. Something in the theory resonates with something in the human mind, and understanding what that something is reveals truths about human psychology, social structure, and the nature of power that are more important than the theory itself.
The evolutionary explanation is the deepest and most fundamental. Humans evolved alongside serpents for millions of years, and the relationship was genuinely dangerous. Venomous snakes were a significant cause of primate mortality throughout our evolutionary history. The result, documented by researchers, including Lynn Isbell in her snake detection theory, is that primate brains, including human brains, are hardwired with an enhanced sensitivity to serpentine shapes and movements. We detect snakes faster than other animals. We respond to snake-like stimuli with greater physiological arousal. Infants as young as 6 months show heightened attention to images of snakes compared to other animals. This evolutionary inheritance means that serpentine imagery carries an emotional charge in the human mind that is qualitatively different from other animal imagery. And this charge makes theories involving serpentine beings inherently more compelling, more frightening, and more memorable than theories involving, say, insectoid or avian beings. The psychological function of the theory is equally important. The reptilian conspiracy theory provides what psychologists call cognitive closure, a definitive answer to the otherwise unanswerable question of why the world is so full of suffering, inequality, and apparent injustice. If shape-shifting aliens are secretly controlling everything, then the chaos of modern life is not random, it is orchestrated. If wars are harvesting operations, then the senseless death of millions has a purpose, however terrible. If powerful families are reptilian hybrids, then the concentration of wealth and power has an explanation that goes beyond mere economics. The theory replaces the terrifying randomness of the universe with the equally terrifying but psychologically preferable certainty of a malevolent plan. At least a plan can, in theory, be opposed.
A 2023 study published in the British Journal of Psychotherapy examined the relationship between early life trauma and belief in reptilian conspiracy theories. The researchers found that individuals who reported experiences of childhood abuse, neglect, or persistent feelings of powerlessness were significantly more likely to adopt conspiracy beliefs, including specifically reptilian theories. The study proposed that conspiracy belief functions as a psychological defense mechanism, a way of externalizing and making concrete the sense of being controlled, manipulated, and preyed upon by powerful others that is the lived experience of the traumatized child. The reptilian theory, with its narrative of hidden predators who wear friendly faces while secretly feeding on their victims, maps with disturbing precision onto the phenomenology of childhood abuse.
The social identity function of conspiracy belief has been documented across multiple studies. Believing in the reptilian theory creates an immediate community, a group of fellow truth seekers who share special knowledge unavailable to the unenlightened masses. This community provides social connection, emotional support, and a sense of meaning and purpose. For individuals who feel alienated from mainstream society, whether due to economic marginalization, social isolation, mental health challenges, or simply the atomizing effects of modern life, the conspiracy community offers belonging. The price of admission is belief, and the reward is a social identity that is, within the community, prestigious. The truth seeker, the awakened one, the person brave enough to see what others cannot. The theory also functions as a form of political critique, however distorted. Strip away the science fiction elements, the shape-shifting, the alien origins, the louche harvesting, and the reptilian theory is making a claim that mainstream political analysis also makes, albeit in different language, that the world is controlled by a small number of powerful individuals and families who operate largely outside democratic accountability, who maintain their power through inherited wealth and institutional capture, and who prioritize their own interests at the expense of the broader population. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is a description of oligarchy, and it has been advanced by political scientists, economists, and sociologists across the political spectrum. The reptilian theory takes a legitimate structural observation and literalizes it, transforming metaphorical dehumanization, the powerful are snakes, into actual dehumanization, the powerful are literally serpent beings. The dangers of this literalization are real and well documented. When powerful people are described as literally non-human, the moral barriers to violence against them are lowered. When suffering is attributed to deliberate alien engineering rather than structural inequality, the rational political responses, democratic organizing, institutional reform, policy advocacy are abandoned in favor of paranoid resistance against an enemy that does not exist. And when the theory's antisemitic subtext identifies specific ethnic and religious groups as the human face of the alien enemy, the consequences can extend to harassment, discrimination, and physical violence against real people. The reptilian theory is not harmless. It is a distortion mirror that reflects real anxieties about power and inequality through a lens that produces hatred and paralysis rather than understanding and action. The question of what to do about the reptilian conspiracy theory has no simple answer. Debunking does not work for those already committed to the theory, because the theory is structured to resist debunking. Deplatforming displaces the community without dissolving it. Ridicule reinforces the believer's sense of persecution and validates the theory's prediction that the truth will be mocked. Education helps at the margins, but cannot reach those who have already adopted an alternative epistemology. The most promising approaches, according to researchers who study conspiracy belief, focus on addressing the underlying needs that the theory serves, reducing social isolation, improving economic security, providing genuine agency in democratic processes, and treating the trauma and mental health challenges that predispose individuals to conspiracy thinking. In other words, the cure for the reptilian theory is not better arguments, but a better society. There is a final irony in the reptilian conspiracy theory that is worth contemplating. The theory claims that humanity is controlled by beings who lack empathy, who view humans as livestock, who engineer suffering for their own benefit, and who maintain their power through deception and the exploitation of trust. But this description, stripped of its alien clothing, is not a description of reptilian invaders. It is a description of the worst tendencies within human beings themselves. The capacity for cruelty, exploitation, and indifference to suffering is not an alien import. It is a feature of our own species, documented across every era of human history. The reptilian theory projects outward what is most frightening about looking inward, the recognition that the monsters are not visitors from Alpha Draconis, but products of the same evolutionary process that produced our art, our love, and our capacity for wonder. We do not need aliens to explain human evil. We only need a mirror. The serpent has been with us since the beginning. It was in the garden before we were. It will be in the mythology after we are gone. The reptilian conspiracy theory is, in this light, not an aberration, but a continuation, the latest iteration of humanity's oldest symbolic relationship, adapted for an age of digital media, institutional distrust, and existential anxiety. The theory is wrong in every factual particular, but the needs it addresses, the need for meaning, for community, for an enemy that explains the inexplicable, are as real and as ancient as the serpent itself. We see serpents everywhere because we evolved to see serpents everywhere. The conspiracy theory simply gives us permission to believe that what we see is real.